So I don't have a whole lot of slides prepared and ready to go, but one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is something pretty simple. And often in my role, my role is like a technical on-farm role, and often the most popular question I get is, what's the key to feeding horses? No matter where I am, what's the key? And I often say to people, what do you think the key is? And people often would say, oh, well, it needs to be low sugar, which seems to be a buzz thing around at the minute. Or people might say it's got to be cool energy because we've got to have cool horses. You guys got any ideas what you think the most important factor to consider is? Alison, any ideas?
What the horse needs is the most important thing.
Yeah, Jill?
I don't know, I've been asked so many questions. I actually didn't hear the question.
That's all right. What do you think the most important factor is? It could be low starch. People want to talk about low starch or low fizz feeds. Sorry?
Balance.
Yeah, balance. Is that what you said? Yeah, balance is important too.
Well, it depends if you've got them in work. I mean, you feed them different reasons.
Yeah.
Depends when you got the horse in work, or they're a broodmare, or just maintenance.
That is true, and that kind of leads to what I'm going to suggest I think the most important factor is. And I think the most important factor is you. Everybody in the room. Because you have the power to ask the most important questions when it comes to feeding horses. And it's pretty much who, what, when, where, why, and how. And if you ask those questions when you're doing almost anything with your horse, really, you can't go too wrong. And that's some of the things I wanted to talk about today, not beat you over the head about products and things, but we're a little bit of a different feed company, and our partnership with KER, we're more inclined to lean towards education and sharing knowledge and developing a trusted partnership with our clients. And that's why, when we talk about you as being the most important thing, there's a lot of different things in the market today. And if you're feeding broodmares or foals, if you're feeding weanlings, yearlings, show jumping horses, eventers, dressage horses, it doesn't matter. It in essence, in its most basic form, the power of observation is often overlooked in many cases. And that's another reason why I say you are the most important factor. Because you can look at some horses and think, oh, that horse looks really underweight, say. But then if you have the observation over a little period of time, you can then start to observe, is it really that the horse is underweight, or is it that the horse is genetically made like that? Or you might observe that the horse has some strange habits that you might think, okay, is this leading? There's some horses you might find eat a lot of dirt or eat a lot of bark off trees or things that maybe they shouldn't be eating, and that can then lead you to try and find a solution. It's not always good to try and rush to find a solution for minor problems as it is for major things. And in the scheme of things, the simple process of feeding horses usually is the best one. You can overcomplicate things a lot. So, again, that comes down to you as a person being really important in the process of feeding horses. The other part of it is developing trusted partnerships with people. And there's a lot of people that are in the business to help you, and there's a lot of other people that outside of the nutritionists that you can help with, vets as well. So I think that's always an important thing that you can engage in, and a good behaviour to get into is finding those trusted partners that develop a consistency with you, And those partners that can start to understand how your property works, what type of grasses you have, what type of hays you like to feed, what type of horses you have. You know, even down to bloodlines, as we all know. Some bloodlines are different types of horses to others. They might develop, some might have hotter temperaments, some might be bigger horses, some might be smaller horses. So again, that's the power of people in this whole equation with feeding horses, and observation and understanding how the whole circle of what you're doing around your own individual farm and your own individual horses and even your own individual operation works. With KER as our business partner, there's also, if you really want to drill into nutrition, it's important to understand your pastures as well. And your pastures can change at different times of year. So you can have pasture testing done, and that's a really good idea, a good way to understand the most basic need of your horse, which is forage, pasture, and understand what's in that before you start rushing out and buying hard feed, shall we say, pellets or muesli feed, because they're going to have more intake of the grass, so that's going to have a bigger influence on what you feed as a hard feed on your farm. So pasture testing is an ideal place to start when you're putting together a feed management program, because you can then look at, okay, so what's the baseline of my pasture? And you can look at it in spring and in summer and even in autumn and winter if you want to. And then you can start to match the correct style of feed with your grass, because the grass is the hardest thing to change really, and you know, the most expensive. And pasture testing isn't very expensive, but it is a really good way to give yourself a baseline on what you're doing no matter where you are. And then you can match that with the right feed. And then if you want to go even further, you can even start to do water testing now. And water testing's really interesting because it's been linked to OCD development in humans and pigs. And there's not a great lot of research data on OCD development in horses linked to water, but that's something we've started doing, and David Nash is talking tomorrow. He's heading up some work we're doing at the minute with water testing for horses. Pardon me, around that. Around more research into the effects, but there are also effects on fertility, and there can also be effects on bacterial outbreaks and things like metritis, and those things can come from poor water. And doesn't have to be brown or foul smelling or crook looking water, we've found in some lot of testing we've been doing, to actually have some red flags in it that aren't, and those red flags aren't always hard to fix. But it is interesting when you start looking into it and looking at potentially the real effects that sort of thing can have on your horses. So again, circling back to the you factor, these are all things that you can engage with a trusted partner to do for you. And they all link together so that hopefully at a point you can start to understand the whole cycle of what's going on your farm and all of the inputs that go into your horse. The other importance of water, if you think about how much feed a horse will intake, they might eat 4 or 5 kilograms of hard feed. They might eat 5, or they might eat 10 kilograms, 8 kilograms dry matter of pasture or hay or that. But throughout summer they might drink 70 kilograms, about a kilogram a litre, so 70 litres of water, 70 kilograms of water. So you can see the importance of water as the single biggest nutrient for any horse, and often it's one of the most overlooked at the minute in terms of the quality and the effect that it could have on, like I said, fertility and on young horse development as well, and on containing some outbreaks of bacteria and those sorts of things in the water. So it is something to consider. It's not a real impost depending on how many tests you want to do. It could be as little as $500 or $600 for a comprehensive test, or you could as much as up to probably 2,000 or $2,500 if you have a lot of tests, but it's certainly something to consider. And if you want some more information, don't ask me, ask David tomorrow, because he's the guy with all the answers. You'll have me saying that. So that's pretty much what I wanted to just talk about was, don't always think that the feed is the answer. It's often finding the answer through observation, through talking to trusted partners and developing relationships with trusted partners, whether that be the feed company you like to use or vets. And consistency is probably the final point. Consistency is really important for horses. Jumping around with different things can really upset their system. So consistency is the other point to keep in mind. Does anyone have any questions on that sort of thing? Don't make them too hard, because that's David's job tomorrow.
I'd just like to make a comment that it's great to hear you talking about pasture in conjunction with feed, because I think it's so variable and changeable with different seasonal impacts that it's really important to have a handle on just what they're getting from pasture and understand what you should be something otherwise. And I think that's the consistency issue is about understanding those balances.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. To highlight that, on the Central Coast, as you know, there's a lot of horse farms down through like Kulnura and Gillaby and those sorts of areas. And the pasture testing we did highlights on the Kikuyu grass a real problem, as most people know, with the calcium phosphorus ratio being inverted. And that can create problems with skeletal development, big head and the like. And often when you have those high oxalate type of grasses, you not only have that inverted calcium phosphorus ratio, but you have also the oxalates inhibit the uptake of any extra calcium that you feed to horses. So one of the great things about doing that pasture testing on those farms and identifying some of these issues was then we could go away and say, well, okay, instead of the farms having to buy super expensive supplements and make it difficult for the staff mixing all different things into the feed, we then modified one of our feeds, changed the calcium phosphorus ratio, magnesium and calcium ratio. We added some things in it that improve the uptake, so to override what's happening in the oxalate pasture. And now there's a solution available that those farms are using, which is simple. It's one pellet. Feed it the same as you do everything else on the farm. You don't have to mix a whole lot of things in. But by doing the testing, we identified what the issue was, and we could come up with a pretty easy solution. So it is really a great way to manage your feed plan. Good, Julianne?